Thank you for listening to this Podcast One production, now available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, PodcastOne.com, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome. You're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Along with me, Tim Dennis. Hello, Tim.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing well, my friend. We've got a great show lined up. There is the documentary Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. It was available digitally on April 7th, available for purchase on the 21st. We have joining us Dr. Stephen Greer, a name that many of our listeners know around the world. Dr. Greer is the founder of the Disclosure Project, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, the Orion Project, and the Sirius Technology and Advanced Research, LLC. He's the father of Disclosure Movement and presided over the groundbreaking National Press Club disclosure event that took place in May of 2001. We're here to talk to him about the new documentary, his work in this field. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Greer.
Oh, thanks for having me. Glad to be with you.
We both had a chance to watch the documentary. First of all, I want to say congratulations. It's a great documentary, really sheds some interesting light. And I've got to tell you, Dr. Greer, having been hosting a show like this for 14 years, I love the fact that there are still aspects of these stories coming to light that even we were unaware of. And one of those points that I wanted to mention, you know, obviously we have people coming on the show often that banging the drum for disclosure, demanding it. When is it going to happen? And, you know, I was actually a little thrown by part of the documentary where you say it's happened twice now for certain. And you went on to describe the and show the scenes from the National Press Club disclosure event from May of 2001. Why is it that, especially in the current day and age, why are more people not aware of that fact and that meeting took place?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to go to one of the points we make in this documentary, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, and that is that the mainstream media is a wholly owned asset on this subject of the CIA and other intelligence agencies. They have people who are dual-purpose national security editors and others that can kill or spin or change a story when requested. And this has been very well documented. So the public naively thinks the fourth estate, as it's called, the free press, is actually intact and uncorrupted in the United States. But it isn't. It's actually extremely corrupted and not at all intact. And this is a real concern, of course, for our liberties and freedom, because most people rely on a free press to get their information. But in this case, it's been completely corrupted by the intelligence community.
When that disclosure came out, can you give our listeners an idea how many people came forward, these whistleblowers, and from what ranks, what was some of the backstories of these whistleblowers?
Well, you know, that whole process started after we had a close encounter of the fifth kind, which is when humans, my group, made direct contact with an ET group that appeared, 4 of these ET spacecraft appeared in the sky at Pensacola Beach. I was approached after that happened, because it ended up on the front page of the Pensacola paper, by members of the intelligence community that were 2 types of folks: hostiles that were very unhappy we were doing this, because they realized we had cracked the Rosetta Stone of how to make contact with these civilizations, and it worked. The others were the white hats, let's call them, the ones who were very friendly to what we were doing, loved what we were trying to achieve, which was a peaceful diplomatic contact with these interstellar civilizations that move through interdimensional space-time to get here. And that began a process where about a year later, I was asked to brief the president, who at that time was Clinton, and his CIA director on this matter, personally. And so the director of the CIA and I had about a 3-hour meeting. What I learned from that was that, in fact, the government had been decapitated going way back to the Eisenhower era, and that the chief executive and members of Congress that I ended up briefing over the subsequent couple of years were not being given information on that because the projects were so secret that they just decided that these politicians who ostensibly in a democracy are running the country just don't have a need to know. So this was a shock to me. And based on that and realizing that those politicians not only don't have access, but are terrified of going forward with something like this. I mean, to say that death threats and assassinations have happened is not an overstatement. I decided to start the Disclosure Project and bring all that out public. So when I started out, I probably had about a dozen of these top secret military, intelligence, and aerospace whistleblowers. Now we have over 980. And so what we decided to do in 2001 and subsequently is to continue to move that information and the intelligence assessment we have made out to the public. And then it sort of culminated in the National Press Club event. And then another large culmination was the documentary Unacknowledged that came out 3 years ago, which has now been seen by over 600 million people around the world. And so this process of educating the public isn't being done by the mainstream media. They're not allowed to. The only time they're allowed to cover this story was like a couple years ago. There's a intelligence front organization that's fronting for the intelligence community called the TTSA that brought out that Tic Tac and that craft line off the coast of California. And they were doing that under the direction of people from the CIA and the military, where they would spin it as a threat. So if you notice, the sub rosa part of the conversation was, yes, they're here, and the New York Times, CNN all jumped in, but the drumbeat was, they're a threat. It's an alien threat. It's a threat to our national security. It's a threat. It's a threat. Now, we were warned by Wernher von Braun before he died in the 70s that, in fact, they would hoax an alien threat as a false flag, and that is how the mainstream media would cover it. So what we're trying to do is educate the public about this hoax and the fact that most of the information on the UFO subculture is also a hoax. For example, you'll see in this movie, The Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, that's coming out, it's got a guy on there who very specifically states that the military and intelligence operations have been doing what the public call alien abductions for their psychological warfare value, to induce fear or to cover up a clandestine operation or aircraft. For example, one of the examples that I know that he shared was there was some people who saw one of our man-made UFOs, because we've been studying how these things operate for 70 years. And someone late at night, wee hours of the morning, saw one operating in Washington State near an Air Force facility. And in order for those people to have their kind of impression of what happened scrambled, they deployed an abduction squad pretending to be aliens, dressed up, all kinds of stuff, abducted those people, did all kinds of stuff to them and put them back, so that they would have this idea that they had an alien encounter, when in reality, it was a counterintelligence operation. So, most of what people think they know about the UFO subject is disinformation or the spinmeisters in Washington and the mainstream media. So what we're trying to do is correct that imbalance and put the truth out there.
There's an interesting line throughout the documentary as well, talking about the spin that's put on these cases, that there is this faction that is warning us, and they're building this, replicating this theory on fear. And then there is the more enlightened side that is embracing this and wants this to take place and sees this as a good thing, which, of course, you and your team are coming down on. I'd just like to ask you, kind of removing yourself from the overall picture for a second, do you see any importance to the cautionary side of this story as well. You know, obviously Hollywood and everything we've ever seen plays up most ET encounters, unless you're looking at ET or Starman, but most of these encounters are violent, aggressive takeover scenarios. Should we be a little apprehensive towards the concept of first contact on a global scale with some of these races, or are we dealing with benevolence across the board?
It's benevolence across the board, and all the evidence shows that. The other data point that people should keep in mind is that this is the 30th year anniversary of doing the CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, all over the world with 100,000 people. No one has ever had the kind of encounter you're describing. That's all part of the brainwashing script that has gone from, central casting at the CIA out through the UFO subculture and the alternative media that has brainwashed the public. A closer account of what had happened that's actually Hollywood would be Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which was actually a docudrama. Spielberg was given access to Project Blue Book documents and some of the secret files at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base when he was researching to do that movie. So even though it was portrayed as fictional, it was more fact than fiction in terms of the kinds of events that happened. So I think that the public has to understand that this ability for the national security state to brainwash people and spin things is very well documented. For example, it's not even controversial now that the intelligence community and Dick Cheney ginned up false reports about yellow cake and uranium in Iraq to justify going in and spending a couple $1 trillion that, of course, benefited Halliburton and Cheney's old company in a war that has proven to be disastrous. It led to ISIS being formed and everything else. The same thing with the Vietnam War. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, which we refer to in this movie, was actually us staging an attack on our own vessels in Vietnam so that the public would be outraged and the Congress would be demanding expanding the war. Well, who benefited from that? The war profiteers, the warmongers, the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. So this whole contagion, since we're in a viral pandemic now, this contagion of fear that they're very good at propagating through society is a stock and trade of how the intelligence community and military work when they want to get the public on the side of a war footing. And, of course, who benefits from that kind of a war footing? The same characters Eisenhower warned us about when he left office in 1961. So I think we have to be awake to this manipulation. One of the people who is in this film, the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind film, is the Constitution Attorney Daniel Sheehan. And he's worked with me since the Disclosure Project that you referred to. And he saw a document when he was doing the Pentagon Papers and during the Vietnam War era and representing the New York Times that listed 42 people who were on the payroll of the CIA, but were major national security and other senior editors at the major media in the U.S. and around the world. So, and this is not a theory. It was called Project Mockingbird. I think people have to understand the extent to which we are vulnerable as a democracy to the manipulations of people who are benefiting from conflict and call them out on it. And that's part of what this movie does. The other part of it is saying, okay, that's going on. What's the solution? And the solution is for people to go out and make direct contact. And I would say that having done this for thousands and thousands of hours all over the world with literally thousands of UFO and ET encounters that I have witnessed and been part of, no one has ever been harmed, threatened, frightened. Now, we have been invaded by military assets on our operations sometimes that have tried to harass us and things of this sort, but those are humans. So I would say that the interstellar presence is decidedly not only benevolent, but they're very much wanting us to develop a peaceful relationship with them. But unfortunately, to be honest with you, there's no one doing that. I mean, the UN isn't, the State Department isn't, no foreign ministry is. So what we're doing with Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which is when humans initiate the contact, is forming sort of a citizens diplomacy effort, ambassadors from humans to these civilizations. And that's really what I think is going to be the ultimate disclosure. People say, when is disclosure happen? I said, well, we did that already. And there's something like 55% of the population believes that we're not alone in the universe and being visited. 43% of the U.S. population believe we are actively right now being visited by ETs. So that's been accomplished, even though it's not officially recognized by the powers that be in the mainstream media. What has to happen now that we've reached those kind of numbers of recognition of the subject?
Well, could I ask you one thing really quickly?
Yeah.
Talking about this, I mean, can't we look at the fact that I believe it was 1952, was it Life magazine, Marilyn Monroe on the cover? There's a huge article inside that magazine discussing the UFOs that were seen over Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Wasn't that a form of disclosure? And then what do you make of I know this will come up from many of our listeners, what do you make of the offhanded remark that Eisenhower made during the press conference when they were asking him about UFOs? And he kind of, said, yes, we're aware of them. We know what's, it was kind of this, we know of them. We know what's going on. And then he kind of exited the stage. Those seem like those are pretty profound versions of disclosure that have just been kind of overlooked all these years.
Well, they have been, and that's the thing. It's actually, as someone said from the CIA that I met with, it's hidden in plain sight. But people aren't having that pointed out to them. That's why we did the Disclosure Project, was to bring out the documents, the witnesses, these historical events, but also to put it into some context. Why would this be kept secret? Well, there are two major reasons. One is they're wanting to reserve this issue as something for a future way to unite the world around a common alien threat, as Reagan said at the United Nations when he said that. The other is that the technologies behind these spacecraft, which were studied and fully understood by 1954, I can give you the date. I have a man who is the senior scientist at the Naval Research Labs. He was in the vault and saw this document. October 1954 is when we mastered gravity control, meaning we could cause mass cancellation of an object, cause it to levitate, lift, go at right-hand turns at 200,000 miles per hour. That was October 1954. What that means is we haven't needed oil, gas, coal, surface roads, nuclear power, windmills, solar panels, pollution, global warming, or world poverty since 1954. And I was born in 1955. I'm no spring chicken. So my entire lifetime, we've been living in a faint shadow of a civilization that has been corrupted by these powerful special interests. But the disclosure that everyone's asking about isn't going to happen from Washington. The disclosure that will come out of Washington will be, you just got a preview of it from the TTSA. There was a kid named Tom DeLong that I had mentored when he was younger on this issue, who got sucked into the intelligence community and cabal and took the bait, hook, line, and sinker, and now has come out with this project where everything is being presented as an alien threat. I think that we have to look at this and say, how do we keep ourselves from being, as the WHO said, being fooled again? We won't be fooled again, but we have been. And we have to do that by saying, why don't we bypass all this nonsense that's secondhand from the government and go out and make direct contact? So the original project I started that actually led to the Disclosure Project and the global disclosure movement was the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind initiative. Why? Because I realized from an experience I had when I was younger that these civilizations wanted to make contact, but they need a partner. It's like a dance. You need a dancing partner. And the only partners that were coming out of officialdom from Washington or any other country were chasing them with jets and trying to shoot them down. So there was no appropriate response from humanity. And that needs to be you and me. That needs to be all of us, because the government is so broken, they're never going to do it, or not for a while.
Hey, I got a new podcast coming. It's called Theory.
Don't you know?
This is Theo Rossi. Our world is changing. For many of us, it'll never feel the same. The important thing to remember is that we are all in this together. And that's some of what I want to talk about on my new show, Theory. We're going to discuss the things that no one ever does. The real talk, the sacrifice, and the struggle that everyone goes through. My life has kind of put me in a unique position to see things honestly. This is Theo Rossi, and my new show, Theory, launches on April 8th, officially on Spotify, Podcast One, and Apple Podcasts.
The documentary is Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. Dr. Stephen Greer, our guest. We have a link to his website and the documentary on today's program so you can find it even more easily. It is certainly something worth investing some time into watching. And now, Dr. Greer, with the different military groups around the world that are taking a more aggressive stance with these craft, with these beings when they are seen, if we have shot them down or have encountered downed craft along the way, why is it that the alien races that we're shooting down aren't taking a more aggressive stance with us over our constant need to try to have air superiority and shoot them out of the sky?
Well, they certainly understand that we're a very primitive civilization that has not reached what Michikaku and others call a level 1 civilization, which means that it's living peacefully and in a way that isn't destroying its own biosphere through their technology. So they understand that we're in a transitional phase from an agrarian society to an actual advanced civilization. And they understand that, we have some serious problems, but they are not, I always tell people there's a sort of sitting in front of everyone, the proof that these civilizations aren't hostile, because we can prove that we have tracked, targeted, and downed, and we have many Disclosure Project witnesses who've been part of these operations, these ET craft. And if they were like we are, which is basically if someone pushes on us, we blow them to smithereens. Given the fact they have technologies that are 100,000 to 1 million years more developed than ours are, if they were hostile, it would have been known in 1940s. It would have been point, set, match, we're done. And I'll tell you a funny story. I was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base where the remains from Roswell went, and I was meeting with the colonel there who was in charge of that, as well as one of their Air Force intelligence officials. And this meeting was ordered by the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff for it to happen. And so I was there with my military advisor and this military guy trying to sort of get into kind of what a later General McCaskill did this to Tom DeLonge at TTSA. They tried to pull this trick on me in 1993, where they go, well, what if these civilizations are hostile and we need to be? I said, look, let me stop you. I've had contact with these civilizations. They are not hostile. If they were hostile, you and I wouldn't be breathing the free air of Earth because of the galactically stupid things you have been doing, where you have tracked and targeted these spacecraft from other star systems with high-powered electronic weapons where they have downed them. I said, if they were really the kinds of beings that your spinmeisters and disinformation agents have been putting out into the public, they would have kicked back so hard you would have knocked the stuffing out of you. And I said, you know that, I know that, so let's just move on. And he just looked. You should have seen the intelligence officer writing furiously as I was saying this. So that's a true story. And what I tell people is that having taken meetings with people like that in the Pentagon and CIA for 27 years, I sort of have seen all of that and how they operate. And ultimately, the solution to this problem isn't going to come from the center of power. It's going to come from we, the people. And I think that's why the CE5 initiative, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, is so exciting, because if enough people start doing that, they're going to find that there's going to be an answer from space. But they're waiting for us to do that. They're not waiting for the White House. So I think most of these civilizations realize that our leaders are a lagging indicator. It's sort of the old expression, if the people will lead, the leaders will follow.
Do you feel then that what the military and the three-letter agencies are doing with the work behind the scenes on UFO disclosure and their concepts of what alien contact may be like, do you believe that they are actively in the know that that's not a problem, or has it been passed through, as a legacy from the original decision that this is how it was going to be put, that now it's just part of their edict, so that therefore they're not necessarily the new leaders, the people that you're coming into contact that are spouting that information, aren't necessarily trying to perpetrate a fraud or a hoax. They believe this because this is what was taught to them all along.
Yes, it's the latter for most of them, and they're victims. I know that Tom DeLonge is a victim of this sort of very well-crafted, sophisticated PSYOP, psychological warfare operations. And I know that there are other people that I've met with who similarly have been brainwashed all the way back to the 60s, because you can set up certain scenarios which will be very convincing and pull out a portfolio of evidence that's very frightening, because if you're the person behind the curtain, it's like the Wizard of Oz, pulling all the levers and scaring Dorothy. You can create and concoct all kinds of things to manipulate people's emotional and belief systems, emotional reactions and belief systems. And they're very, very good at doing that.
So are they using Tom DeLonge and his organization, the Academy to the Stars? Are they utilizing that as a propaganda machine without his knowledge by giving these bits of information, leaking documents that are going to lead him down that path? Or what are your thoughts on that? Or why do you think they're using him specifically?
That's exactly what they're doing. They're doing that with them and other people in the UFO subculture because they need to have some plausible distance for that operation. So they always have to have a cutout, it's called, someone who will carry that baggage for them. And some people are knowingly doing that. But I think the majority of people are doing it unwittingly. And they're victims of being targeted with disinformation. Now, this is not to say there's not at a certain higher level, and I've met with some of these people, let's call them the controllers, the ones who are really in control of this. They know damn good and well what they're doing. But they also have a compelling interest in creating a sort of, if you will, global civilization that they can control through militarism and fear rather than through sort of any sense of a peaceful civilization that can go out into space peacefully. They have their own paradigm, and that paradigm is how they control the masses. I mean, look how well they were able to manipulate the public after 9/11. We took complete leave of our senses, passed the Patriot Act, allowed for all kinds of warrantless searches and surveillance by the NSA and others. So they know that if they can create a frightening scenario, people will give up their freedoms in exchange for security. So this is a tried and true ruse by power-hungry sociopaths, let me just say it, which is what we're dealing with in these unacknowledged special access projects. That's the proper name for super secret projects dealing with this issue. So I think that begs the question is given the kind of assets and power that those folks have, what can the average person do? And really, this documentary is an answer to that. And we're also going to come out very soon with an app that will train people in the techniques of making contact. It's going to be called the CE5 Contact app. And that's something people should look for in your iTunes and Google store, because that's an entire training program so everyone would know how to do this. And what we want to start having are millions of people bypassing the government and making direct contact. And that, by the way, is the ultimate disclosure. The ultimate disclosure is not going to come out of Washington. It's going to come out of we the people doing it.
Now, can I ask you a question about that then? And understand, I promise you, I'm not part of the propaganda trying to perpetuate this fear mongering. But for people that are interested in making contact, if they are doing or following a specific protocol, is it something traceable by the military, by the government? And what would keep them from doing more of these false alien abduction scenarios to help prop up their angle on the story? I'm just curious. Does that possibly open us up? Yeah. Thank you.
It's a great question. And very few people know enough to even ask it. So kudos to you. The truth is, the answer is yes, but the yes part is that because I'm the founder of this project, that has happened to me a lot. However, what we have found with people doing this we have like 100,000 people now doing this all over the world. These intelligence operations, while they have substantial assets, don't have assets for that level, which means that the answer is that for people out there, the answer is no, that can't happen because it overwhelms their system. The numbers of people doing this simply precludes their being able to do the kind of response that you're referring to, where they could target a group going out and doing this. Now, with that said, they could do certain things that would be deceptive. A false flag is a pop culture term. At the Pentagon, they call it a deceptive INW, or a deceptive indication and warning, which is when they stage something. So let's say you're out making contact. There could very well be an ET object seen or being, and then suddenly a man-made object comes in that looks like a UFO, but it isn't. And I'll just give everyone a hint. If it has any seams or parts, it's 100% man-made. No interstellar vehicle has any component parts visible to the eye. So it's very important people understand that. It's a big takeaway. And the man-made ones are, to me, very obvious. So that could happen, although it's unusual. What is more typical, and we will get into the weeds here a little bit, is that the ETs will pick up on a military presence. They will stay on the other side of what I call the crossing point of light. And this is why this stuff is at the CIA is called WSFM. It stands for Weird Science and Frickin' Magic. Because interstellar vehicles, when they're going beyond the speed of light, resonantly shift out of 3D material space-time into something very approximating what the mystics would call the near astral or etheric. And they can pop in and out of that dimension into this one at will, even when they're stationary. So often when we're out, we'll have an object appear complete 3D, then vanish, and all we'll see in its place is something almost like I don't want to use the word ghost, but like an astral etheric form that begins to move around us and then starts communicating through our electronic devices, like our magnetic field meters, magnetometers. Really cool stuff. So these ETs are very aware of any countermeasures by the military or intelligence anywhere in the world, and they can go beyond it because their technologies, most of their technologies are phasing, let's call it, resonating beyond the speed of light. And all of their communications technologies are interfacing with consciousness and mind and thought. Elon Musk has Neuralink. He's trying to develop a system so you can think to your computer and it does something. Well, the ETs have that on steroids. They have that well developed for thousands of years. It's like you and me talking on a cell phone to them, to use technologies that are integrated into the thought field and the quanta of thought, I call it. Just like there's a quanta or a photon. They have that down to the level of thought and consciousness with an electronic system that's communications. So all of their technologies, communication, propulsion, space-time transfer, are centered in the ability to go beyond the speed of light, which is also the speed of all electromagnetic, but also the speed of atoms and photons and electrons, et cetera, and so on. So that is a prerequisite to being interstellar. If you can't do that, you can't get far enough out in space if you're going less than the speed of light. So these technologies, which are also well known in the intelligence community and aerospace contracting firms like Lockheed Skunk Works and my uncle's old company, Northrop Grumman, what we have to understand when we're out making contact is that there can be some pretty weird phenomenon that happens that's ET, and they're doing that because if they're too much in the 3D sphere, it's like shooting fish in a barrel from the point of view of our satellite and ground-based and air-based systems. So people doing this contact need to be educated, which I speak about briefly. I mean, this is a 2-hour feature film intended for a regular public audience. But with your audience, I'll say that there's a great deal of information that will be in this app for training people about what to look for and the kinds of phenomena that happen. Because, anyone who's thinking that an ET spacecraft is like a 747 landing at JFK is sadly mistaken. They're extremely advanced trans-dimensional vehicles, and the occupants and the vehicles all phase and can go from 3D regular materialized to completely invisible, but it's sitting right in front of you. How are you going to detect that? Well, that gets into a really big discussion on what kind of instruments you have, what kind of cameras and what the settings are, what you can do with remote viewing. Russell Targ, Dr. Targ, who was a laser physicist and became a CIA remote viewer, is in this film talking about these capabilities. So that's why we all have to begin to understand the nature of our own mind and consciousness and the universe around us.
We're going to take a quick break. Dr. Stephen Greer, our guest. When we return, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. Contact has begun. We'll talk more about that right after this.
We all need a break now and then, especially in these times, but why not keep your brain active while you relax? That's really the key, and that's why I love the fun puzzle game Best Fiends. It's an oasis of fun you can take with you everywhere you go. When I need some me time, when I really need to just get away from it all, Best Fiends is that fun escape from the everyday that I desperately, desperately crave. And believe me, I need that me time. There are thousands of fun challenges and tons of cute little characters you can collect along the way, especially as you're solving those puzzles and defeating the slugs. I know it may not sound like I'm speaking English right now, but I am. I truly am speaking English right now. You'll find out when you get into Best Fiends. I guarantee you. I'll tell you, when I get into the game, there's lots of levels, thousands of levels that you can get into once you're playing the game. The game is always forever changing. And for me, I love the constant challenge to my brain of solving these different puzzles. And along the way, getting rid of those little slugs, those little irritating little slugs. But I collect these cute little characters along the way. I level them up. They're my little friends that help me along the way and help me get to where I'm going on these different little challenges along Best Fiends. And I tell you, Best Fiends is one of the most challenging, one of the most fun, most addicting games I've ever played. I absolutely love Best Fiends. And I want you to play along with me and with Dave, if you would. Just jump on social media. Now, keep in mind, you don't necessarily need to be connected to the internet to play Best Fiends, but if you want to join us and connect with us on social media, you can. It's one of those great games where you can connect with your friends virtually, or you can play it on your own. Either way, you don't need friends necessarily to play this game, but it helps because you can compare, contrast, and you can compete against each other. That's one of the best things I love about Best Fiends. Now, Best Fiends is also a unique and exciting puzzle experience, unlike other puzzle games out there as well. It's kind of a multi-tiered type game. You've got your challenges, but you've got your puzzles as well. And if you played those other puzzle games out there, yeah, sure, they're challenging, but Best Fiends will put your brain to work, and I think you're really going to love it. Best Fiends updates their games monthly with new levels and events. It never gets old. It's never the same stuff. Every time I sit down to Best Fiends, I'm getting something brand new, and I love it. I absolutely love it. Here's another great thing, too. You can take Best Fiends with you wherever you go. You may find yourself sometimes having a few minutes only to play. You can play Best Fiends like that. Maybe you find yourself on a bus, or you find yourself in an Uber, or you find yourself somewhere where maybe you've only got a couple of minutes to play. That's fine. Do that. a lot of times Dave will take his best fiends with him when he's traveling for the Holzer files, and he'll play it as he's on a plane or on set, wherever he's at. If he's got a few extra minutes in between shoots, he'll play it there. When I've got a few extra minutes here at home, I'll play it here. You don't necessarily need to sit down and commit to the game for hours upon hours. You can take it, play it, put it down, and just spend a few minutes on it. That's absolutely fine. And that's what's great about Best Fiends. You don't have to commit a lot of time to it. You can put it down, pick it back up, and go with it. It's a great game, especially when it comes to dedicating time to it. Like I mentioned before, you don't need the internet to play Best Fiends, so you don't need to worry about Wi-Fi access or using your cell data. You can always come back to it if you want to network with other players. Again, you can collect tons of characters to help you along your way, to help you on your journey, and you can level up those characters to help you take out those slugs and those other enemies along the way. It's a multi-tiered, multi-challenge game, and I absolutely love Best Fiends. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, Tim, it sounds exciting, but how do I get in on the action? It's real simple. Best Fiends has thousands of levels already, with new levels, events, and characters added every month. It's hours of fun right at your fingertips, and you can even play offline. With over 100 million downloads and tons of 5-star reviews, Best Fiends is a must-play, and it's real simple to get. You just go and download Best Fiends free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's it. That's friends without the R, so remember, it's Best Fiends. Once again, go download Best Fiends for free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R, Best Fiends.
We're talking with Dr. Stephen Greer. The topic is his new 2-hour feature-length documentary film, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. We have a link up for that program, or for his documentary on our program today, plus a link to his website so you can find it. It was made available for digital streaming and such on April 7th, available to purchase here the 21st. This is something that if you're as fascinated as we are on the show about alien contact, UFO sightings, what is disclosure, what has happened so far, and kind of an encapsulating catch-all, this documentary, I think, is going to be exactly what you're looking for. This brings so much more light to the subject and gives you insights into many of the questions we as casual observers want to know. What is going on? Why is this going on this way? And why aren't we getting more information? I'm curious how you respond, Dr. Greer, to people that think that maybe you're part of the misinformation, and you're leading us or leading people to this end of the spectrum as opposed to the other. Now, you answered it eloquently a little earlier, but just to encapsulate, I think what you basically were saying, and you say it so well in the documentary, is the proof already exists that we're not under any real danger from these creatures or these beings, these aliens, because if we were, it would have happened long ago, probably very long ago, before we would have the capabilities that we do now to be more destructive towards them.
Correct. Well, I mean, people can say anything. You know, the internet's full of trolls, and people sit in their mother's basement in flip-flops, making accusations.
Yes, they are.
Look, I'm an emergency doctor, an ER doctor. We're the frontline guys saving people's lives. I don't make things up. I've never received an Indian head nickel from the U.S. government, although I have paid a few $1 million in taxes over my lifetime. Now that I'm age 65, I wonder if I'll ever see any benefit. But the point I'm making is that, I have done this in the public interest, and I share the truth no matter how shocking it is as I find it. And I think anyone who will look at the witnesses, the evidence, the documents we put out, it holds up. For many years, people said, oh, well, Dr. Greer, this can't be true what you're saying about the government having been decapitated. And about 20-some years ago, I shared information about the meeting I had at the Pentagon with the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Tom Wilson. And recently, Dolan and others have been talking about this leaked document that was about a meeting that a man had who's in the aerospace industry with the admiral that I briefed, and it details what happened at the meeting, but also the fact that the admiral had been denied access to these projects, and when he pushed on it, he was threatened personally with having a star or two removed from his lapel. Now, I was the one who was the stand-up briefer for this admiral, and astronaut Edgar Mitchell was there, and a few other people, a couple of military witnesses, and my military advisor. And when that document came out, everyone was so astonished. And I said, but I told you all this 22 years ago. And now, of course, the document has verified that that's exactly what happened, and that the nature of these unacknowledged special access projects, as unbelievable as it sounds, is exactly what I had warned people it was in the late 90s and early 2000s. So, my record stands for itself. I think that what people can't get their minds around is that no matter how screwed up you think the government is, it's an order of magnitude worse, all right, from what I've seen. And I have a home in Washington and meet with people all the time. It is completely a broken system where these unacknowledged special access projects do exactly what they want to do when they want to do it. And the people that you think are running the world are absolutely clueless. And it's a really very dangerous situation. So I sort of feel like if there was any evidence that these civilizations were hostile overtly, we would know it. On the other hand, I think what people aren't asking is, how do they view us? We're always, we're so narcissistic. We're always like, oh, what, Bob, let's us, me. And as you know, the narcissism index has gone up from 30% of the population to 70 or 80% now, since the 70s to now. But let's flip that around. What do we look like to the ETs? I mean, here we are. We have a dysfunctional civilization that's still fighting each other with wars. We have suppressed the technologies for 100 years that would keep us from destroying our biosphere and would eliminate poverty for everyone on Earth. So I think and then we're going into space with a space force, with satellites that have very powerful weapon systems on them. And we have been targeting ETs. So we need to understand that there are planets out there that don't even have a word in their vocabulary for war. They just don't. We do, because we've evolved from primates and chimpanzees that organize into tribes or troops and fight each other and kill each other. But there are other species that don't. I think it's the other way around from what people are saying. I think it's a complete 180. We're viewed as an existential threat, not only to our own planet and ourselves, now that we have weapons of mass destruction, but we are potentially a threat to other planets. So some of the things that the ETs have done, where they have, shall we say, clipped our wings a little bit. Let me give you an example. We had a killer satellite up there that was pointing out in space, not down towards any country on Earth, that was targeting these craft. I was meeting with a Defense Intelligence Agency official who said that satellite was disabled by the ETs because it was an offensive weapon targeting something way out in space using what are called longitudinal or scalar electromagnetic weapons that go at multiples of the speed of light. Well, so I think that far from them being aggressive and hostile, they're extremely concerned that we're going to blow up our own planet, but could kind of get off the reservation out into space and become a threat to innocent planets out there if we don't evolve socially and spiritually to a higher understanding of how to live together in peace. So I think that actually when everyone's focusing on the alien threat, I think it's a misdirect. I think what we really need to do is get a mirror, a big mirror, and all of us look in the mirror and ask, who are we? What are we doing? What are we doing to this beautiful planet? Why are we going out into space with weapons? Why are we still fighting each other? Why don't we have free energy systems and abundance so everyone is out of poverty and the earth is restored to its pristine nature, which we have the ability to do? I think we have to hold ourselves accountable instead of running around worrying that these other civilizations are some threat, when clearly, if they were, it would have been demonstrated by now.
I would like to ask you a question. And I've been debating about this simply because we've tried to be the respite for people during this time of not having to deal with this. But do you think that on the current path we're going with the COVID-19 virus going around the planet and acting quite devastatingly, do you think that the extraterrestrials will make their presence known in a grander scale if this does get out of control in mass?
No, I will tell what my concern about that is are increasing police state tactics to control the population as a result of the COVID-19. We're completely crashing the U.S. and maybe the world economy. And the U.S. economy is the biggest economy in the world. In Virginia, we're on lockdown until the middle of June. And if a policeman catches you out driving around, they can pull you over to inquire about what you're doing, where you're going, and why, even if you're just trying to go to the pharmacy or the grocery store. So this begins to look a lot like Nazi Germany if we're not careful. I'm not saying we shouldn't be socially distancing. We should. And that this is a very nasty virus. But my concern is some of the way this is playing out could be utilized or co-opted by nefarious interests as sort of a beta test to see how they can control the population in an emergency, but in a way that's very abusive. The other part of it that concerns me is not that this virus, even if it killed 3% of the population and 100% of the population got it, there would still be over 7 billion people on the planet. So it's disruptive and it's horrible and it's terrible for anyone who gets it, who gets very sick. And I've taken care of 60, 80,000 people in emergency and trauma situations. I know what we're looking at and facing here. However, it's not an extinction level event. It's not something that is going to wipe out, 80, 90% of the population. So I think the bigger test for COVID-19 is how do we react to it? Can we be sensible? Can we get it? Now, we dropped the ball 3 months ago when we should have had a couple 100 million test kits out there by February, so we could have contained this thing. We didn't do anything. We sat on our hands. Now it's everywhere. So we have a real crisis, mainly because the people in control, the federal government, a coordinated response, were asleep at the switch. And I think almost any doctor I've talked to and PhD scientist agrees with that assessment. But now that we're in this predicament, we need to be mindful that our liberties aren't infringed upon beyond what is really necessary, number one. And number two, I don't think this is something that would change how the ETs interface with us. If we were facing an extinction level event, let's say a killer asteroid were to hit or something like that, or a polar shift where because of global warming and all the ice melting, the equilibrium or the spinning of the Earth gets upset and we go through a massive Velikovsky type shift of the poles, and where, you could have massive billions of people in harm's way. Yes, I think there would be a massive intervention. What I have been told is that under such a dire scenario, there would be an intervention. Moreover, if we were to go to mutual assured destruction and launch thousands of nuclear weapons that could end life on Earth as we know it, they would definitely intervene in that scenario. But it's something short of an extinction level event. It's my understanding they're going to let us try to figure out this situation. It's our home planet, and they're here to kind of understand what's going on and contain the damage if it gets too far out of control, but also to be sure humans don't start going out into space as an aggressive species that victimizes other planets. My understanding is that is part of why they're here. And on top of it, they're documenting things. For example, we know that there have been a lot of ET spacecraft and beings seen collecting water samples, maritime biological samples, plant samples. So I think they're documenting to what extent we're damaging the genome, the genetic material on the planet. Is why we have escalating cancer rates, because I think they're tracking and extrapolating forward that if we don't get off this self-destructive trajectory we're on, that, we could really be in serious trouble soon. So I think that they are, a lot of the things that these ETs are doing, as I understand it, are scientific and monitoring, the sort of surveillance missions, because we are mucking this up so badly. I mean, remember, the ETs offered to Eisenhower at Muroc, near where Edwards Air Force Base is, in 1956, to assist us if we would simply become peaceful, make peace with the Soviet Union, lay down the nuclear weapons, stop the war machine. And Eisenhower was inclined to do that, but the warmongers and the, let's call them the crypto-fascists, the hidden fascists, like Paul Mellon and others who started the CIA, who were pro-Hitler fascists until the day we declared war. But then after the war started, the aerospace and intelligence community in the United States in the post-World War II era, those people circled their limousines and stopped Eisenhower from even having access to what was going on. It was Eisenhower who lost control of this subject during the 50s, between 56 and 60, which is why he gave that famous speech, Beware the Military-Industrial Complex, even though he was a five-star general and World War II hero. So I think that the ETs are wanting to assist. They're wanting us to become partners in space peacefully, but so far they haven't found, let's say, a government willing to do that or able to do that. So my understanding from the contact I've had with these civilizations is that they want us to do it. They want everyday, ordinary people like me and you to do this.
All right, then, with that said, watching our planet for however long they've had this connection with us, and maybe that's a good place to start off with when you do answer, at what point do you believe that they did start making true contact with us? Was it millennium ago, or was it, within the last 100, 200 years? But then seeing that this is kind of our nature, that we are just a bunch of primitive monkeys that are still beating rocks and pounding our chests. When do you really believe that they will be ready to communicate with us without the on a global scale to everybody, without the extinction event being raised?
As soon as a critical mass of humans get together and create this mass consciousness effect that we talk about in this documentary about the 1% effect, where it creates this transition and transformation of the planet. And they need a certain number of people. I'm using the 1%. That'd be 75, 80 million people. I think there's a certain number of people that have to do something besides looking at YouTube and yakking about this to actually go out and do something about it. It's sort of like people kvetching about the civil rights conundrum. And I grew up in the South with the Jim Crow laws, and it was terrible. But it wasn't until there was a critical mass of people who got together in the civil rights movement to do something about it that changed. That didn't change because the Kennedys or Johnson wanted the civil rights. They were trying to avoid that controversy. In reality, it wasn't. It was when the grassroots people got up and did something nonviolent but constructive. So we have to do the same thing, except instead of protesting in the streets, we need to be out there making contact with these civilizations. And I think the ETs are waiting for that. When I had my experience with them and sort of created these CE5 Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, we call CE5 protocols, it was made very clear to me that they are very eager to have people who understand consciousness and the infinite aspect of the mind and of space and of a future that is peaceful and enlightened. They want those people to evolve on Earth and then reach out to them. So they're really, I would say that could happen tomorrow or in a year, or it could have happened 50 years ago. It's not about when in terms of time, it's what. What are the conditions that they're looking for? And I think they're looking for a suitable critical mass of people who not only know that they're here, but are willing to engage them in some kind of a bilateral communication and relationship. And they're not getting that from the governments of the world. I think that'll come after. But for now, it's like the people who are concerned about this need to take the initiative and do it. And that's why, I've done this. There is a method to my madness. I started out doing CE5, and that led to the Disclosure Project. And I realized we had to educate people about what part of this is real and what part of it is contrived, and then do the Disclosure Project unacknowledged. Now, this next phase is trying to move enough people over to just in their backyards or wherever they want to do it, do these protocols, learn how to do the remote viewing and protocols, make contact. And when a critical mass of people do that, I think we're going to see a very big change, not only in human society and how we function, because there's this sort of 100th monkey effect that happens, where, mass consciousness begins to propagate non-locally without any linear communication. That's the whole science of consciousness part of this documentary is about that the mind is actually not limited in space and time. And Dr. Targ talks about that in this film. And that's really exciting, because if enough people understand those principles and begin to do this together, what happens is that we get a whole field shift in human consciousness and how we're behaving. It's like they sent meditators into cities. They put 1% of the population, say of a town of 200,000, they'd send 2,000 people, and they would be in there in meditation and very positive energy. And they would find that emergency room visits would go down, violent crime went down, spousal abuse went down. All these things that were measured were found to be affected, even though no one knew 1% of the population was there meditating.
Like the power of prayer.
Yes, it's like the power of prayer and meditation. And that has been documented scientifically, and it's real. So when enough people do this in a peaceful, higher conscious way to make contact with these civilizations, it actually moves and alters the entirety of the civilization in a positive direction. So people need to understand, each of us, Dr. Mitchell and I talked about this, that we're each of us are kind of a conscious quantum hologram, where the entirety of the cosmos is folded within the nature of our conscious self, the mind itself, which is infinite and unlimited. And for that reason, if we begin to experience in the meditative state and then in our actions this aspect of ourselves, it can transform not only our own lives, but to those around us. And that's what we've been seeing. It's such beautiful experiences. I think if you've seen the film, yes, you'll see the kind of beautiful experiences people have had out under the stars together doing this. It's really beautiful. And I think that the ETs are waiting for humans to come together and do this in a very positive way. And then when we do, I think, it's like the old saying, the heavens are rent asunder. I think we're going to see very big level of contact happen once enough people do this.
And again, folks, I've always counted myself as a skeptical believer, somebody who has had and seen many things. It doesn't mean that I jump to a conclusion on every aspect of this, that it is something supernatural, preternatural, that, sometimes there are very simple answers. But having been part of some intention experiments at Isetti Ranch, and having been there on 4 occasions and having seen undeniable, and again, this is my opinion, folks, but undeniable proof that there is something going on there. If you looked past the concept of alien craft, if we looked into the conspiratorial angle of, yes, maybe the government knows that there is a group of people meeting at this property on this date because James Gilliland has made a big deal out of it, and they're going to fly craft over to give us that impression. So maybe you want to buy into that aspect. I will tell you, one of the most unbelievable things I'd ever seen had nothing to do with the actual craft in the sky or aliens on the ground. But while we were there, going on 8-9 years ago on the 4th of July weekend, there was a huge festival that he was going to do there, and the clouds were filling the sky. And I looked at James and I said, well, this is going to be a bit of a bust. And he just gently smiled at me and said, nope, they told me they're going to keep the skies clear over our property. James, how are they going to keep the skies clear over your property? And he said, Dave, just have some faith. I'm telling you, brother, I'm in communication with these beings, and the brothers and sisters have assured me we're going to be able to see it. I will tell you this, folks. From horizon to horizon, the entire sky was blanketed in dark gray clouds, except for a huge circular cutout above James Gilliland's property. I kid you not.
Happen.
It's unbelievable, Dr. Greer.
I've actually seen this happen 100 times at least on our expeditions, where it's like that, and it literally, like a circle around us, opens up, and this phenomenon starts happening. We have seen these sort of things happen for 30 years, and it's real. I'll tell you something even more hilarious. We had a team out in West Virginia, and they didn't get the sky to open up, and they had some things happening on the ground, and at the end they said, "Oh, we wish we could see ET." And they looked up in the sky, and the clouds parted, and the letters, I kid you not, ET appeared in the sky above them.
No way.
Yeah,
that is
like
awesome.
Just weird stuff. So it's amazing. One time we were at near the Great Sand Dunes in Colorado, and we had a member of our team ask the ETs to signal in some kind of mathematical code by turning on and off the stars in the Big Dipper. It was perfectly clear sky in the desert. And sure enough, one by one, and sometimes two, there would be the stars that are in the Big Dipper would go on and off. And I had military night scopes, no cloud, no object. And they were creating some kind of energy field to occlude or block the light from those stars so that they would be signaling to us in this code. This went on for 23 minutes. Everyone saw it. Absolutely unbelievable. The kinds of phenomena that happen that's so interactive, once you get into the vibe of doing this, it's just mind-blowing and sometimes really fun. And they do have a sense of humor.
And it was in watching this too, folks, as people petered out throughout the night and would go to their tents to sleep, this circle would get smaller in the sky to the point where, you know, it was still considerable, but it was very small over the property. We had seen phenomena all night, and the group of about 8 of us that were left stopped looking up and looked at each other, and we're like, wow, this is pretty incredible. And, you know, blah, blah, so many people have turned in. Yeah, I'm getting tired too. Maybe we should call it a night. We look back up, the complete sky was filled. There was no opening. There was nothing. So it was, if you talk about the power of intention and want some kind of proof of concept, I mean, that to me was one of the most powerful. Although we've done prayer and healing requests on the show for 14 years and have had unbelievable and undeniable response from people and locations and rain and such that we've put forth. If you're looking for this, it does exist. You just have to be aware of it and be open to it. Now, right now, Dr. Greer, we are at a unique point in our history. They say that because of what's going on with the virus, all the closures, we're getting cleaner skies, cleaner waters. Nature seems to somewhat be rebalancing during this reset. It's almost like planet Earth is on a fast and you know, is starting to regain some of that. Right now, people are at home. Right now, people are looking for things to keep them occupied. What can we do? What can you share with our listeners that want to start the intention now in order to make this communication? You know, we have hundreds of thousands of listeners around the world that are in the same position you and I are in right now with self-quarantining and would love to be a part of this intention. What can we do to start that today?
Well, number one, see the movie start to finish once or twice, maybe 3 times. Then if you get this app, this CE5 Contact app, it has the meditations and the remote view training and all the protocols in it. And then what I'm going to start doing and have been doing on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Dr. Stephen Greer 55, Dr. being DR, not spelled out. That YouTube channel, we're doing live events. What we're going to do are mass meditations. So we did one that I think had about 150,000 people a couple weeks ago. We're going to start building that up. So eventually we hope to reach hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people meditating together and doing this together all at the same time. Now that we're, all on lockdown, we can be doing this from where luckily I live on 65 acres in the Blue Ridge Mountains, which is gorgeous. But even in your backyard, I was in downtown D.C. and did this once on the roof terrace of my house that I have in Washington or had. And it was my second daughter's wedding, and they went off to party after the wedding, and the old folks were up on the roof. And we were doing this, and this ruby red sphere appears, I kid you not, right over downtown D.C., and the White House appears and floats over the city for a few seconds and then dematerializes. So you can do this anywhere. And so I tell people, if in your backyard, if you're socially isolated, you can still do this, and you can do it joining us. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel. You'll get notifications on when we'll be doing these events. So I think it is a time, it's sort of like if we've been given lemons, let's make some really good lemonade. Now that we have to be at home, we can practice our meditations and then do these sort of linked up together. And we can notify you and your listeners as well.
Yes, please do.
About this. And it'll be fun. But I think it would also be great for people to feel connected that way in the consciousness field.
I'm all for it. Please let us know as those are going to occur. We'll also include a link to Dr. Greer's YouTube page on today's program so it's easier to find and be a part of. Yeah, I think we're at a unprecedented point in history where if people want to make a change, people are I hate to use the word desperate, but in a sense, that's what they are. And they're looking for something to occupy their mind, their time, and feel like they have power again in this kind of topsy-turvy world we're in. This is an opportunity for them to do that, to feel re-empowered and see if we can, in fact, make this happen. Could you tell me a little bit about, you talk about the fact that you've been in contact with these races and such. How many races of alien beings are you aware of?
Oh, and it's an enormous number. And I know it's in the thousands. It's certainly not just a few dozen. And remember, some of them have been around since, let's call it the emergence of life on this planet several 100 million years ago. And they're at different levels of development. The ones that most people, there's all these stereotypes and caricatures, of them. But if you look at this documentary, we have some photographs of ones that have come in and out of our circle, and they don't look anything like the ones that you see on the cover of, say, Whitley Strieber's books and stuff like that. The sort of the scary, bug-eyed looking. I think that there's the other part of this. I think is that if you look at the sky. Just go out on a clear night. Every stable star system, meaning it's not a supernova or what have you, has planets around it that have creatures, beings that are conscious and capable of being aware of this aspect of mind. It's actually the cosmos is teeming with life. And now, not all of those intelligent life forms have technologies to travel interstellar. So that's a much smaller subset, but it's still very, very large because there are trillions of star systems out there with planets, literally trillions. So I think that what we have found is that the civilizations that are cleared to interface with a hostile planet like Earth is a certain number, but that number is growing. What we have found, now this is this bizarre comment I'm going to make right here, may go past people. Or be a bridge too far. But over the last 3 or 4 years on these expeditions that we lead all over the world, what I have found is that there are entirely new civilizations that have never been introduced to humans that are coming in, and that we are their first contact. And that is happening to groups all over the world now that we have, around 100,000 people globally doing CE5. So I think that it's actually a dynamic, evolving process. So to answer your question, I don't think there's a fixed number. It's an open-ended number of intelligent life out there. The ones that have been cleared to interact with this planet is a growing number.
Are they among us right now, walking on this planet and living amongst us?
Well, I hear accounts of that. I think not. What I think is more likely is, and there's a lot of mythology around that. My understanding is that they're certainly here in conscious presence, whether they're seen or unseen, and they're certainly aware of what we're doing. But in a corporeally, a physical, biological body walking around, that I seriously doubt. For one reason is that they wouldn't want to, and they don't need to. There's no need for them to be doing it at that level. But there are people who believe that they've seen that. It may happen transiently. We have had, when we've been, for example, we were at Mount Shasta one year, and we had more than one that materialized and walked around us. And at Joshua Tree, we had 4 of them totally physical in their bodies standing by a Joshua Tree just outside our circle that everyone saw. And they moved around, and then they dematerialized, sort of teleported out. So those sort of things do happen, but I don't think they're like going to work with you and, just doing regular everyday work. Except to the fact, I think that in a deeper sense, all of us are ETs. I mean, I actually believe that every human being has had a connection to our lineage, what the native peoples call the star people, with these civilizations. I even think that our genetic code, in fact, can't be fully explained by just Darwinian evolution on Earth. So, the question becomes, perhaps we are all the same. And that's actually the motto of my organization, one universe, one people. I view this as an integrated, conscious, holographic universe, and we are all one people living in it. And that's how I view not only humanity, but all these other civilizations.
If the government, and I know this is a question that our listeners ask after episodes like this, and if I don't ask it, I'll be dealing with these same emails for the next 6 months. If the government is so dead against passing the information that you and your group are trying to get out there, how is it that they're not shutting you down, either by shutting down your filter, shutting down your availability on social medias, or shutting you down physically?
Well, they've tried all that, including the latter, and it's not pleasant to talk about. But, we put things in place to mitigate it, let's say, and it's worked so far. You will notice that, like in the big mainstream media, they tend to blacklist the sort of things we're doing and not cover it. In social media, we've had a lot of our sites, for example, on our YouTube, we put up a CIA witness who had helped develop the RF chips, the little radio frequency chips that the intelligence community put in people that they've abducted. The abduction people thought that those were ET, but they're not. They're made with some things that they've gotten from space to trick people, but they're actually man-made. And the guy who worked on that project starting back in the 70s, we put his video up. I couldn't release it till he died. I've got a bunch of stuff like this. And after he died, his name is Pawlek, Pawelec. It's on our YouTube channel. The numbers within a week went to 675,000 people saw it. In one day, I saw that counter hacked into, so it said it was 6,750. They took all the zeros off. So that happens on my site because it takes it out of the algorithms and search algorithms. So this happens to us on a daily basis. So whatever you see my numbers are, just remember those are being infiltrated and corrupted by people who are in the backbone of the internet who can do that. So, that's just one example. It happens all the time. Recently, my Twitter account was suspended. I couldn't even get into it. We've had our Facebook account blacklisted where we can't send things out to people outside of my 145,000 followers on Facebook. We've had a lot of that kind of harassment, and you expect it. So we just do the best we can. But what I would ask people to do is, I'm only one person. We don't have an office or staff. We're all volunteers. I gave up my medical career My wife will be 72 this year. We do this out of a corner of our living room in our house, and it's a very humble effort. So what we rely on, like this film, I want to shout out the people who contributed. You can go to ce5film.com and still contribute to the Get the Word Out campaign we're doing for the film. But, we raised $785,000 to get the film produced and get it out. By the way, the distributor doesn't pay for any of the marketing. We're having to pay for all the marketing, anything to get the word out. We have to do. So it's a labor of love. But with the internet, people can go to our site and sign up for our newsletter at SeriousDisclosure.com, and we will be sending out once a week something that people can post all over the world on social media, because since they keep suppressing my sites, if other people do it for us, we can get the word out. So we just have to find creative ways of doing this, and I'm making a sincere request to anyone listening who can help us to join us and help us just spread the word.
Well, we'd love to, and to be a part of that. And I'm, again, looking over the YouTube channel, folks. There's some great items on there, including an 8-minute meditation led by Dr. Greer. So many different bits of this information that you want to look into. Listen, I'm like many of you. The fun of watching a goofy documentary like The Tiger King, it's fun, but it's bubblegum for the mind. It's time to enhance your full experience and dig deeper into something that actually impacts our entire planet and can impact our future. By watching the documentary, by keeping up with Dr. Greer's research, I think that you're going to find that there's a lot more that you can glean from that. And there's no reason that we, as an audience, we get 150, 200,000 downloads of an episode after it airs. If all of you put this documentary out there into the internet and to the web to get this word out there, spread it to your friends, neighbors. Oh, there's no reason we can't have an explosion like what happened with the Tiger King documentary, but putting into people's hands something important. Again, the documentary Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind became available digitally on April 7th, available to purchase as of, you said April 21st, correct?
Oh, no, it's the other way around. It's for purchase April 7th until the 21st, and then it'll be on the rental platforms after the 21st of April. Yeah.
Sorry. And then, of course, he has two other previous works, Serious and Unacknowledged. Both of them broke crowdfunding records and ignited a real grassroots movement. So make sure that you check out all of these documentaries. The ones that are out and available now, get them out into the hands of people to start watching. Challenge your friends, neighbors, coworkers, all the people that are bored at home to examine these concepts. And I'm seeing all of these book club videos showing up on social media. Why not challenge the people in your inner circle to watch us and then discuss it together as a group afterwards? This is how we might start to see some actual changes and re-empower ourselves as part of the human race. If this is what the aliens and ETs are waiting for, we have never had a better time in history than right now to make this happen.
That's right.
In examining the information you wanted to bring forth in this documentary, and as you're always uncovering new aspects, what really stood out to you in the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind documentary? What new bit of information did you find most explosive that you haven't shared in the past?
I think when people see the photos and videos of the encounters we've had, and the kinds of CE5 contact that's happened, they're going to really have their minds blown. I don't know what your reaction to it was, but it's really moving.
Oh, it is
amazing, but it's also very spiritual, because there's a section of the documentary that deals with the science of consciousness and how our mind is actually omnipresent. It's not limited to our skull. And the science behind that, from the work like at Dr. John at Princeton with random number generators, where you think to the number generator and it shifts more zeros than ones, for example. The work that was done by Dr. Emoto by putting intention into water, and you get these beautiful crystals. There's this effect that we can have in consciousness that is so profound that when we awaken to that ability and begin to practice meditation and also believe in ourselves, believe that this can happen, and enough people do that, we can change the trajectory of our world. We can pull back from this path of global destruction and going out into space violently into a world that is a peaceful, free energy, enlightened, advanced civilization that becomes interstellar. And this is why, in the documentary towards the end, I recount the story of Colonel Corso having an encounter out at White Sands where we were detonating all the nuclear and hydrogen bombs, and in the 50s, and this ET says to the colonel that they wanted their help, and the colonel very brashly goes, "What's in it for me?" And the ET looks him in the eye and says, "A new world, if you can take it." So I think we're being offered a new advanced world, but we have to take it. We have to also collaborate, make it happen. So I think that, if we see that, instead of, feeling like we're all helpless, and the reality of it is the ball's in our court. We have enormous power individually and collectively, but collectively even more so, to make this kind of millennial change happen, or once in a millennium or longer happen. And that's what's exciting about living right now. And, as horrible as this coronavirus is, maybe, because I know in June, we're stuck on lockdown till the middle of June in Virginia, that we, have an opportunity to spend quality time in meditation. And, it's fine to look at bubblegum shows on Netflix, but Unacknowledged is now on Netflix. And by the way, if you want to see Sirius, it's for free on my YouTube channel. Anyone who wants to get on it, you don't have to subscribe to any platform or anything to see it. So what I tell people is that we can take this time to educate, but then join together these group mass meditations we'll be doing. And if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you'll get a notification when we're going to do that. And we're going to try to do those periodically going forward.
That sounds fantastic. Yeah, check out the documentaries, again, on Netflix or right on Dr. Greer's YouTube channel. The link for his YouTube channel is on today's program. The link for his website on today's program guide and information as well, so that you can access it and keep going. I know we only have a few minutes left together, Dr. Greer. With the contact that you've made personally with these extraterrestrials, has there ever been an instance of, I don't want to use fear because that comes across wrong, but anything that they've shared with you that is alarming or disturbing?
Perhaps. I think that what I have seen is two trajectories. It's a little bit like the Hopi prophecy rock, where there's one line that terminates and one line that goes up and out forever. We're at that point where we have to choose what path we're going to be on. And if we stay on the path we're currently on, we're on a terminal path. I'll just be very blunt. Our civilization and the Earth cannot go on indefinitely with the kind of weapon systems we have, but also the technologies we use just to drive our cars and heat our homes without destroying the biosphere. So we have to make this big civilizational leap. And it's unfortunately, what's been made very clear to me is that destiny is in our hands, but we have to create that world. We have to create that future. And it isn't something that's going to be imposed upon us from outside, from space. The children of the earth have to do it. So it's a cautionary vision I've gotten, but also a very hopeful one, because the other part of that is that we absolutely can do it. But we have to come together as a people for the greater good, not just for some narcissistic pleasure, and then do it for the benefit of the planet and the future children and grandchildren and generations that are coming after us. And one of the beautiful things I saw was shown once was a 500,000 year rapid sort of kaleidoscope going into the future, but that there were like 20,000 generations of beings waiting to live and be born on this planet that are in this sort of cosmic waiting room, counting on us to get this right. We have to. And we don't have another 100 years to fritter away, because there is not another 100 years of fighting and weapon systems and environmental degradation left. So it's something we need to get done urgently. But if we have to understand, if we come together with higher consciousness and a peaceful intention, we can make that happen in a very short amount of time. So I'm actually incredibly, from what I've been shown of the future, I know it can happen, and the future on the other side of this, let's call it this chasm we're facing, is unimaginably beautiful. A world that would be at peace in its totality, in living in space peacefully, interstellar, and the technologies would give us a world not only without pollution, but with no poverty and also no sickness. The technologies that have been kept secret would also cure all these terrible diseases that face the human race, including the coronavirus. There are electromagnetic and transdimensional systems that would neutralize that right away that have been classified. So all of that's going to come out by people coming together and working together, getting educated, sharing together. And I'm convinced the reason I gave up my medical career was that I am convinced that this is doable. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't believe that. And so that's a very hopeful message that, it can be a brand new world, but we have to accept it, as the ET says, if you can take it. That's, I think, the most moving, but also, in a sense, some of the scary visions of then this is hanging in the balance based on the choices we each make, our free will. What do we do or don't do? And more importantly, the sins of omission, as they're called. What we don't do, we should be doing. So I tell people we all need to come together and do the right thing and make some effort in this direction. And if we do, enough of us do it, even 1%, let's say, which in America would be 3 million people, is completely doable. We could transform the whole condition of the world. If we don't come together and decide through our own volition to make these changes, I think we're going to be facing more and more cataclysmic problems like this coronavirus. I think this is just a warm-up. So we have to make a decision. It's time for us as a people to decide what kind of future do we want.
Are you making attempts to connect with Tom DeLonge's group to see if you can give them a better understanding of what's going on, or do you feel that divergent path is already broken off pretty far and it'll be hard to get them back in?
No, I mean, they're certainly aware of what we're doing, and vice versa. It's a free world. I don't get involved in the politics of all this. I only comment on it when it becomes something I think is a threat to the human consciousness. In other words, to take a rather prosaic military encounter case and turn it into a national security threat is a bridge too far. But so, I'm chastising them over that. But I just generally try to steer clear of politics. Certainly, I'm open to anyone from that group or anyone else reaching out to us. Luckily, we've been able to reach hundreds of millions of people, and I think that they have access, because of their CIA contacts, to the big mainstream media, such as the New York Times and CNN and what have you. That anything they put out there, the big media is going to cover it. So we're certainly in a situation where if they wanted to reach out and have an understanding about this, I'd be open to it. But ultimately, part of this, to answer your question, I don't pursue things. I grew up in the South where, you had people who, we call them the Bible thumpers, who thought the world was 6,000 years old and we rode dinosaurs like pets and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't matter how much scientific evidence or proofs you give to someone who has a fanatical belief system. You're not going to change. So if someone wants to know and has an inquiring, open mind, I'm certainly happy to talk about that. But if someone is in a situation where their mind's completely made up, and particularly on a negative, sort of brainwashing trajectory, I mean, let's face it, we've gotten into so many bad wars and conflicts that we could have avoided if calmer heads had prevailed. Most of the times, people who are reacting in that negative emotional space who have really wacky belief systems, there's not much you can do to explain or discuss. And so it's not a rational discussion. It's more what their core beliefs are. And, you know, to each his own, that's fine. But I'm certainly open to anyone from any organization reaching out to what we're doing and having a discussion. But, you know, certainly, I mean, Tom DeLonge has stayed at my home back in the early days when he was exploring this. So, I mean, he certainly understands where we're coming from. It's not like that there's any paucity of information on his part about what our objectives are.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you for keeping the voice alive and for putting these movies out, the documentaries, and giving people a chance to re-examine this and remove themselves from the state of fear. It does seem that is and has always been part of what the government wants in the most controlling way is through fear. And you know, it seems to make sense, like you said, that if this is really taking place, you know, these aliens could have done damage to us long ago. And if they were truly a violent threat or of violent nature, you and I would not be having this conversation. But you do believe that all of the interactions that people have had with the extraterrestrials, the ones that they claim are abducting them or infiltrating their homes, being aggressive with them, you don't believe that that's necessarily a viable information regarding true extraterrestrial contact? You believe it's more of this cloaked government program?
I think it's cloaked government program and beings from other dimensions that are not ETs. So we haven't gotten into that. That's I have a whole series on my YouTube channel about this. People confuse a being that's actually from another dimension that can have an effect in this dimension with an ET that's an interstellar transdimensional civilization. Because there are some similarities of phenomenon, people lump them all together. So that's another whole discussion. On top of the intelligence community deliberately confusing this issue, you have what I call a cosmological confusion because people don't have clarity on the different types of dimensions and how they can interface with people. For example, everyone's heard of poltergeists, where like a ghost pops in and is so emotionally driven that it can actually move something off a table or what. I've had this happen in my emergency department. Well, that's not an alien. It was something from another dimension that popped in and had an effect into this 3D dimension. So a lot of people have experience with those kind of creatures, and those are not ETs. This is why I don't use the word alien. Alien is a wastebasket. Is it someone from Mexico or is it someone from Alpha Centauri? I use the word extraterrestrial biological entity, EBE. So if it's an interstellar civilization, obviously they're traversing other dimensions to go from point A to B because you can't go in a straight line at the speed of light. It's too slow. But there are other phenomenon and other intelligences that reside in other dimensions that aren't extraterrestrial that people could have all kinds of night terrors with and dream states and other things happen. So I think you have to understand that and the counterintelligence operations and the actual ET phenomenon. And unfortunately, most people just don't dive into enough of the granular detail to be able to make a distinction between one and the other. So they get confused with one being something it isn't. So they'll think that they've had an ET encounter when it was a covert op, or they think it's an ET encounter when it's something that's purely from another dimension that isn't extraterrestrial. Does this make sense?
It does. It does. It opens up a whole new perspective to how people perceive that.
Yeah. So there's a wonderful Vedic expression from the Vedas and the Sanskrit. And before I was a medical doctor, I was a Sanskrit and Vedic teacher and meditation teacher. And one of the great expressions is, knowledge is the greatest purifier. So if we have enough knowledge of these things, then we will be clear or pure in our understanding. And so that's just a educational process. Is why I did those webinars and seminars that are up on the YouTube channel now that anyone can look at, that goes into the whole cosmology and the different phenomena and how it can appear. All those things are up on our YouTube channel for anyone to see who would like to look at them.
Fantastic. Again, folks, check out the documentaries, pass it around, get it out there, let people know about this. It's important. Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind is available to purchase, and now you'll be able to screen it as well. We've got links up to Dr. Greer's website on today's program so that you don't miss that, and keep an eye on his YouTube channel for more information. Dr. Greer, thank you very much today for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you helping us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Stay safe.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Well, that's it for today, folks. We'll be back again with you next week with even more of the best in paranormal talk radio. And I'm curious, Tim, I mean, you hear this? You and I both had a chance to watch the documentary.
Yep.
It is pretty astounding. What is your takeaway from all of this, Tim?
You know, I tell you, Dave, from watching the documentary, I was pretty overwhelmed. It's a lot. It's like drinking from the fire hose. You get a lot of information from this documentary. It's well worth a look. You definitely want to tune in and watch this documentary, whether you be a novice to the entire UFO and ET phenomena, or whether you be experienced and really be delved into that world. It's really chock full of information and some interesting stories as well. I really was fascinated by different parts of the documentary, and there's some information in there that I wasn't familiar with. So, you know, I always attack things with the skeptical mind. There's some areas in the documentary where it kind of tickled the old skeptical brain, and I didn't know whether I should believe or not. There were other areas where, I definitely went, oh, okay, yeah, gotcha. I definitely see that. I can see that where that would happen. There were some things that Dr. Greer said today that you know, I was shocked at as well. So it makes you think. It really does make you think.
I agree. Check it out and let us know, folks. Watch it. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the documentary. And if you've seen his other documentary, Sirius and Unacknowledged, let us know your thoughts on that as well. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back again next week with more of the best in paranormal talk radio. And don't forget to try out our True Crime Tuesday program every Tuesday. For more information on all of the programs, just keep checking out darknessradio.com, or go check out your Google Play or iTunes App Store and get the free Darkness Radio app that'll allow you access to our shows and ways to subscribe to our true crime program. We are still working on things, folks, and we've got some other great changes that are coming up here soon, so keep tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. That's Tim. I'm Dave. This is Darkness Radio.